Hello and welcome to Air, Water and Economy for Iran. For those of you who are seeing us for the first time, we are an independent, citizen-made international campaign, here to bring you, people of the world, urgent issues of economy and sustainable management of natural resources in Iran, and to share with you the problems, as well as the solutions, and how we can bring solutions to reality. If you haven't done so yet, please join us on social media. So far, we are on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And we want to say thank you to the 90,000 people of many countries of the world who have joined our Facebook page up to now. We can say without a doubt that your participation will make a huge difference in reaching the goals of this campaign, which are ultimately goals of all of us: good economy and security, and good health and democracy for all. Problems and challenges of Iran: air pollution that is so bad that is going to make you sick or kill you. Water bankruptcy that has forced millions of your rural people into displacement. Poverty and absolute poverty that is wasting the lives of 1 in 3 people of your country are, as we all know, problems and challenges not unique to Iran. Unfortunately, we are all faced with some of these problems and challenges all over the world, only with different severity. Economic security and public health are our rights as citizens of the world, and it is our and our government's responsibility to use any democratic means available to ensure these rights. Connecting with each other internationally makes us stronger, because it makes us more able to learn from each other and more able to cooperate and stand behind each other. We are natives of Iran, and this is why we can bring you information directly from sources in the native languages of this country, with interpretation and context that you would rarely find anywhere else internationally. If you would like to raise awareness about issues of sustainability or environmental and economic justice in your country or community, using sources in your native language, please contact our hosting platform, WorldMedia in English. This is the first in our new series of presentations. In these presentations, we will talk about water in Iran countrywide, starting with a brief background about the country's geography and where and how people live. Then we will talk about what has happened with water management and distribution since 1990s, when government policies aimed to put the country on a path of food self-sufficiency amid rapid population increase and urbanization. Then we will explain why the country is considered to be in water bankruptcy today, and we will describe the economic consequences. In the following presentations, we will go through the environmental consequences of water bankruptcy and evaluate some of the solutions that have been implemented so far and their effectiveness. And then we will look at other solutions which are also available and which should be considered for implementation. And as always, you do not need any technical background to easily follow along with us. But before going on to our presentation today, we want to share with you the latest developments about Iranian people's struggles for their rights and democracy. As you may have seen in news, last December and January, by some estimates, millions of Iranians came out on the streets again, this time all over the country, chanting slogans against the regime in power. There were a few attempts to occupy government buildings, but the protesters were unarmed and for the most part only walking on the streets. The regime responded by firing military-grade ammunition into crowds and injuring and killing at least thousands of people. The regime closed all internet and telephone connection to the outside world and claimed that the demonstrations had been infiltrated by foreign agitators who had fired at the protesters. And they claimed that the security forces had only tried to control the situation, But many people had managed to record videos and witness accounts to share with the outside world. By confirmation of United Nations experts and organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, all evidence showed that the regime security forces had been behind the killings. These organizations did not mention anything about foreign agitators. The regime also arrested and imprisoned thousands of the protesters and has executed a number of them already. If you have seen the news, you will also know that last March, the US and Israel launched air attacks targeting military bases and government buildings with the goals of forcing overthrow or surrender of the regime. The supreme leader, along with a number of regime's highest individuals, were assassinated by air attacks. The regime responded by attacking Israeli cities and US bases in neighboring countries. At this moment, skies of Iran are open to US and Israeli militaries. According to media reports, more than 1,000 Iranian civilians and 6 American military personnel and 12 Israeli civilians have been killed, and many more have been injured. And the regime is still holding. Certainly, we will see major changes in Iran in coming days, but it is not clear if or how people of Iran will reach peace and democracy soon. This will depend on Iranian people themselves, but also on the rest of us in the world, because in our interconnected world today, we the people hold the ultimate power, but only if we inform ourselves and speak out where needed. And this is even more reason why this campaign and your participation in it are very important. We will keep you updated about the social and political developments in Iran as part of our future presentations as well. And please share any comments or questions you may have. We also want to pay our tributes to so many other brave young people of so many other countries of the world, who in the past year and for the first time ever have come out on the streets in parallel to protest and demand their rights, while tragically so many being murdered by their rulers. In Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Madagascar, in Kenya, in Morocco, Peru, Timor-Leste, the Philippines, and Indonesia. The good news was that in Bangladesh and Nepal and Madagascar, the guilty rulers could not hold on and left, albeit at such high costs. We want to tell these brave young people and all people seeing us that you are not alone. And we want to tell you that we are doing this so that you can get your rights not by risking your lives on the streets, but by building connections and international solidarity and cooperation. And we want to tell governments and politicians everywhere that their first job is to use the people's wealth and resources for the needs of the people and not for anything else. And that if they can't do their jobs properly, they will have to change. We also want to express our sympathies to millions of people of Central America and South and East Asia who have faced devastating results of hurricanes and typhoons and floodings this past year. At this moment, we cannot do more than wishing you the least harm and fastest recoveries. But we do want to say again that we must remember that it is only ourselves, the people, who need to help each other to make our world a more just place to live in. Please stay with us now for the next hour for our presentation today about water in Iran, starting with a little background about Iran's geography and people. Please send us any comments or questions. We will try to respond at the end. Okay, so on this map we see Iran in the world, a country in West Asia and in landmass a relatively large country, 1.6 million square kilometers in landmass, or if you want to look at it in terms of distances, if you travel from the north of the country to the south, it's about 2,000 kilometers. Or if you travel from the west to the east of the country, it's about 1,500 kilometers. So a large country that is actually 17th largest in the world. Although not all of it is inhabitable. On this map, if you look at the shaded areas, the areas that are having a shaded color, these are higher altitude areas like mountain, and the other areas are lower altitude, which in this country are actually deserts. So you have actually a desert here and a desert here, and these are not inhabitable. There are two main factors that shape the geography and ecologies of this country. One is the two large water bodies that you see on the north side, the Caspian Sea, and on the south, the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And the other factor that's very important to the geography of this country is two long mountain ranges that span almost completely the width and height of the country. One of these mountain ranges is the one that starts from this northwestern area, which is mountainous itself, and comes down as a straight line almost to the south. And the other mountain range is the one that starts from the same northwest mountainous region and goes east almost exactly along the south shores of the Caspian Sea and comes to the northeast of the country. And mountain ranges contain water basins being more or less sink-like formations in higher altitudes that can collect precipitation water. And once precipitation water reaches a certain amount, it flows down and it shapes into rivers that flow down foothills of the mountain. And of course, rivers and the water they contain are what make settlement and civilizations possible. So if we go to a map of rivers of Iran, on this map we can see the mountains more clearly. The first mountain range, this one, which is called Zagros, and the other one which is called Alborz. And the blue lines that represent the rivers, we can see they all start from the top of the mountain and come down on the foothills on both sides. It is believed that this country was mostly settled in the second millennium of BC, between 2000 BC and 1000 BC, although there must have been people here a long time before as well, but the serious settlement with agricultural villages and so on is believed to have taken place in that period, perhaps by migrations that happened from the north. It's believed that perhaps Indo-European people migrated here during that period and brought the present language of Iran, Persian, which is an Indo-European language, here. So let's show you some of the natural landscape and ecosystems of the country. And we have used the power of Google to show you not one photo, but many photos at once. And so if you look over here, you see photos of foothills of the two mountain ranges. That's the keywords that we have used to actually make a search in Google. And as you can see, this is where the mountain meets the land. And it's fairly green and moderate because close to the foothills of the mountains, the temperature is still more moderate and there is humidity. And of course, this is what makes coming to this land and practicing agriculture and settling down into villages possible. But if you move away from the foothills of the mountain, it becomes less hospitable, harder, and the surface of the land becomes more like just sand, and of course not so easy to live there. So if you go over here, this is where you move away from the foothills of the mountains, and as you can see, it's harder and drier. Although this didn't stop Iranians to try to settle these lands, and they found a way to bring water over here as well. Not using the surface water resources, but the groundwater resources. And they did that by use of an engineering construction called the qanat, which its invention is usually credited to ancient Iranians actually. And how the qanats worked, we have a schematic. How these constructions worked is that people used water tables that they knew existed underneath the mountain, and they used gravity by digging vertical shafts to find the water first, and then sloped channels to bring the water to the surface. And so they used basically gravity to construct artificial channels to bring the water to the surface. And if gravity was still on their side, then they could dig channels and direct the water to where they wanted, often long distances away from the foothills of the mountain, to the peripheries at least of the deserts. And they were able to actually start settlements even in those areas. And one of the most famous examples of these settlements is the city of Yazd in central Iran, which is actually some 80 kilometers away from the Zagros mountain. And yet people as far back as 3,000 years ago brought water here and created this city. So on the caption here we can read, city of Yazd in central Iran with a population of 500,000 today was built entirely supported by a number of qanats. The oldest qanat, called Zarch, is 3,000 years old and 80 kilometers long. We should also mention that this wasn't the only city. Mainly the whole area of peripheries of the deserts were settled this way. There are many more cities and settlements and agricultural villages around them that were built this way. And eventually there came to be thousands of these qanats all over the country, although many of them are not in use anymore because of the fact that the underground resources have been depleted by at least 60%. And we will talk about the depletion of underground resources as well as other resources in the future presentations as well. Okay, so this was the ecosystems of the mainland of Iran. So going back to the map of Iran rivers, we've talked about the mountains and mainly their foothills on both sides, but mostly on the inside. That's the area that we can call mainland of Iran. If you go to the west side of the Zagros mountain, the area on the shores of the Persian Gulf, this is an exceptional region in the country which actually has its own different and much better ecosystems and climates as far as agriculture goes. This region coincides mostly with the present-day province of Khuzestan, which is actually an extension of the Mesopotamian region to the west because of the flat lands and the presence of a number of bigger rivers that irrigated this land and made it much more suitable for agriculture. And that is actually the reason that there was a civilization here way before the mainland of Iran was settled, the civilization of Elam, which later just got mixed up with the Persian civilization that came to be over here in the second millennium of BC. So we mentioned this area because of its ecological and economic importance for the country, much more productive in terms of agriculture. And also oil was discovered here in the 20th century, and this region became a kind of breadwinner for the country with the cash that it brought with the sales of oil. And of course this region, even more so than the rest of the country, has been severely polluted and water resources have been depleted. And also the oil industry has polluted this region because the oil industry hasn't been updated and modernized. Therefore it remains a very polluting industry, and it's polluting not only the air but also the soil and the waters. So let's see some photos of this region. So as you see, this region is both flat and green, which is not typical of the rest of the country, because the rest of the country, if you have green, then it's not flat, it's mountainous, or if you have flat, then it's not green. But this region is both flat and green, although we should mention that these photos are old, and with the amount of pollution and desertification that has happened here, these same locations may not look like the same today. So this was one exceptional region in the country which deserves a mention of its own. There is another exceptional region in this country which is also important ecologically and economically. And that is the narrow strip of land that is enclosed between the north side of the Alborz mountain range and the south shores of the Caspian Sea. So between the Caspian Sea and this mountain range, you have a narrow strip of land that is divided between two present-day provinces of Iran. And the reason this region is special is because of much higher than average precipitation in the region. And the reason for that is that the water that evaporates off the surface of the Caspian Sea gets blocked by the mountain here, and it does not escape to the wider regions. And so when it condensates and precipitates back on the land, there is a lot of precipitation, much more than the rest. And this factor has made this region much more green and much more fertile and suitable for agriculture. And we have some photos of this region as well. And as you can see, it's very green and lush, not typical of the rest of the country. And of course, it's a small region, but in terms of productivity, obviously it has a lot more productivity. And notable about this region is the fact that on the north side of the mountain, there has grown a rainforest called the Iranian rainforest, which is millions of years old. And it is just a gem of ecosystems in the country and perhaps even in the world, in terms of the species that live here, and in terms of the fact that, like any rainforest, it absorbs CO2 and gives off oxygen. And this rainforest as well has been depleted a lot by deforestation, by logging, and real estate development, and littering, and so on. And it has suffered a lot, like the rest of the country, in terms of its environments. Okay, so now let's talk about the people. Where do people live and how they live in this country? If we go to a map of Iran cities, as you would expect, and as you can see on this map, most of the black dots representing towns and cities are along the mountains, and there is less of them in the middle here. But this map is only showing perhaps towns and cities that are populated with more than tens of thousands of people. But this civilization, as we said, started as an agricultural civilization with small villages that were home to something like 20 households or more or less, but around that number. And up to even the middle of the 20th century, the majority of the people of Iran were living in these agricultural villages and practicing agriculture and feeding themselves and the rest of the country as well. We can see some photos of the Iranian villages. These are just some photos of these villages that are spread all over the country. And there is actually 69,000 of these villages all over the country, which from the outside at least they look like they would have looked like the same centuries ago even. But there is also cities that have developed in the past 60 to 70 years, or in fact cities that did exist have become bigger. And we can show you some photos of cities. And as you can see in these photos, aerial photos of the biggest cities of Iran, some of the biggest cities of Iran, you see a different world. You see cities that would look like about the same, at least from the top, anywhere else in the world. And so the urbanization that happened meant that the population of the country that in 1979 was about 34 million people, and of that number, 18 million were rural and only 16 million were urban. So in 1979, just 34 million people and 18 million still rural and 16 million urban. So still majority rural in 1979. In 2024, we have at least 86 million people, of whom 20 million are still rural, 20 million rural, and 66 million urban. So we see that the rural population in the past almost 50 years haven't changed much, but the urban population has quadrupled almost, 4 times more. So people that used to live in rural villages, like these people, are now in a small minority. And like in this photo, you see this family who are still okay, and they have what they need in terms of water and everything else to raise their crops and ship it to the city for sale. But unfortunately, not all of these villages have the water to actually practice agriculture. If we go to some photos of water shortage in Iran, like in these photos, you can see that people in Iranian villages are waiting for a truck to bring them some water. And this is water that they will use only for drinking and washing and cooking, not for agriculture. They don't have any water for agriculture. And this is happening in thousands and thousands of villages. It's not just some exceptional regions and so on. In fact, to get the numbers, let's go to the government itself. If we go to this article by the media, this gentleman is a vice president who is in charge of rural development and matters of deprived regions. And so we have a vice president that is in charge of rural development and matters of deprived regions. And the fact that the government is even admitting that there are deprived regions is new and looks like a good thing, although there is no other signs to be confident that anything really will happen. This gentleman is saying that of the 69,000 villages in the country, there is only 38,000 of them that still have any residents in them. So 69,000 rural villages where 38,000 still have any resident in them, and 31,000 have been completely emptied of any residents. So that means that almost half of all the rural villages in the country are now completely abandoned and nobody living in there. Well, if you read the rest of this article, you will hear some usual excuses that the people from the government have been giving for a long time and promises that have not been fulfilled. Also, this high-ranking government official doesn't even admit the root cause, or at least one of the main root causes of this mass exodus. If you read here, he says behind these migrations there are an array of factors like employment opportunities, decrease in quality of life, social changes, decrease in income, and climate change. Well, if you read this list of possible causes that he talks about, you would think that these millions of people who left 31,000 villages of the country during all these years just did it for some better jobs or some better options for quality of life, or you could blame it on global warming, which is happening all over the world. Well, you would believe this if you thought that these people would actually get something better after they leave their ancestral villages. What really happens to these people is they end up on the peripheries of cities in illegal dwellings that often don't even have the services that they had in their ancestral villages. And if they do work, they end up doing kinds of work that are even dangerous or illegal, or in any case very low income, not things that they wanted to do. So it's not like they make a choice for a better life as you would do in developed countries. It's more like forced migration. And it goes back to the situation of water, and actually everybody knows that, and if you go to other sources, you will see shortage of water as one of the causes. But it's been a kind of endemic and perennial problem in this regime, where they don't actually admit root causes because they cannot or they don't intend to solve them. Although the situation of water has been so open now, and it's got to a point where it cannot be hidden anymore. And probably even because of campaigns like ours who bring the information to public outside the country, it's something that they need to admit at least. And that's why more recently you can hear it from not sitting government officials, but at least from former government officials. And so if you go to this YouTube video, in this video that just came out 2 months ago, the gentleman on the left is a former Minister of Agriculture. He's been Minister of Agriculture for 12 years. And more recently, Director of the Environments Department for 4 years. And otherwise, in the past 30-some years, he's often had high-ranking positions related to agriculture and environments in the country. And so he knows A to Z of what goes on in the country and what has gone on in the country with respect to water and environments. And in this YouTube video, he says very clearly that surface waters of Iran are dead. He says nothing is left of it except for 2 rivers in the country which still have some water in them. And we will explain what he means by this shortly. So he does admit the situation of what they call still inside the country a crisis, and what many experts outside the country are calling a bankruptcy. But if you think that with a video like this anything is going to change, that really doesn't seem to be the case, because even here he's talking with a sitting member of parliament who is on a committee looking at water policies in the country. And in fact, the video becomes more like a shouting match between the two of them, and they won't agree on anything. And given the fact that the gentleman on the left is not in government anymore, you would think that the policies won't change. And the fact is that this gentleman coming on a YouTube video and saying these things doesn't actually cost him anything, because he's not in government anymore. And if anything, it might earn him a little bit of respect from people who have been complaining about these things for a long time. And it also may show that there is a certain degree of freedom of expression in this country, which is actually not quite true, because this is only happening on YouTube and on internet, which is not available to, for example, the millions of people who don't have water in the country, who are the main stakeholders in this. And it is filtered as well, and so even the people who do have internet may not be able to easily access it online. But going back to our quote from this gentleman who said that surface water resources of the country are dead, including all the rivers. We know that rivers of the country are dead, and this is where you would get your water. One of the places you would get your water for agriculture. The other place is underground resources, and we know from other sources that underground resources of water, where you would get water through digging wells or daghanats, are also on the way down. 60% of them are gone already. And the other way that you get water for agriculture and for life would be from the sky, rain and snow. And we know that precipitation has also dropped by at least 40% compared to its historical norms in the country. So this is the real situation with the water. And so if you don't have water in your agricultural village, and the only thing you can do there is to farm and raise livestock, if that's taken away from you, then you do have to move, regardless of where you're going and where you end up. It's not simple movement in a country or migration by choice. It's more like forced displacement. Now, let's see what 2 rivers this gentleman was talking about that he mentioned are not quite dead. Well, if you go back to the map of our rivers, one of the rivers that this gentleman was talking about is called Karun, and it's in the province of Khuzestan. If you remember, one of the exceptional regions in the country that is more abundant with water, and it's no surprise that this river has survived so far all the dam building and all the transfers and so on. Although, as he said, it doesn't have the same amount of water that it used to have. And even this river, like many others, are just being polluted by wastewater and sewage. And we have a media article about that. This is a media article about the same river where wastewater from hospital, probably sewage, is just let out into it without any treatment or anything. And so this is the situation with the biggest river in the country, which used to be the only navigable river in the country. That is not quite dead yet. The other river that the gentleman talked about that is not quite dead yet is over here. It's called Sefid Rud. And this is not surprising either. If you remember, this is our other exceptional region in the country where there is a lot of precipitation and humidity. And this was the biggest river in this region. And according to this gentleman, it has survived at least so far, although it's depleted a lot. And just recently, the governor of this province as well was complaining that there is too much sewage and other waste in this river that's just been discharged into this river. And the smell is bothering the people, and the cancer is coming soon to the region. This is what the governor of this province was saying. And we have a photo of this river as well in a media article. Well, in this photo you can't feel the smell or see the sewage, but you can see that the water is kind of dark and all the litter beside it. We also chose this photo of another river in the northeast of the country. This is a river called Kashafrud, or at least was a river called Kashafrud, only a few kilometers from the city of Mashhad, the second largest city with 4 million population, which probably owes its existence to this river because we have it in our literature that in the old times this river was a place where life started here or civilization started here. And right now this river doesn't carry almost any fresh water. All you see here is sewage from the city of Mashhad that is let out in this river without any treatment or recycling, and also littered as well. And in the same city you have a recreational water park where city people can take off their clothes and have fun in this pool of fresh water without thinking how this water is provided to them and what the cost is on environments and livelihoods of many other people of this country. And what you see here is not an isolated thing, and by no means the worst of it. Basically, it's been the policy of the government here to provide for cities, and in ways that have been profitable only to some, without putting any limits on demands and without regard for consequences on the environments and the economy. And this kind of consumption is encouraged not only nationally but also internationally. If you are seeing us on YouTube right now, you just have to type travel to Iran or something like that in your search box, and you will see tons of videos that want you to buy a ticket and go and stay in a hotel and enjoy the cities and people of Iran. In these videos, which sadly get millions more views than ours, they don't tell you how your water and electricity is provided and what the real cost is on ecosystems and rural people of this country, who, by the way, don't see almost any of the money you spend here either. And in the caption for these photos, we can read only one example of mismanagement, a minor example actually. Left, an artificial water park in the city of Mashhad, where some people can enjoy playing in fresh water. Right, Kashafrud, a major river that made civilization and settlement in the Mashhad region possible. Present population close to 4 million. This river is now almost completely dried of fresh water, but it carries 130 million cubic meters of waste per year, including most of Mashhad's sewage. Some farmers still depend on kashafrut for irrigation. And so if you're a farmer in this region and you have to use this water, or in fact this sewage, for your irrigation, you would understand why you wouldn't want to stay here and you would want to move out. Okay, so now let's go back to the vice president and his interview about mass exodus of rural people. An interview in which he didn't mention one of the main causes of this mass exodus, water shortage, as we just saw. He also didn't mention where these people went, what was the destination or destinations of these people. Well, at least a lot of these people went to live on peripheries of cities, and here we have done another search for you to show you some images of life on the peripheries of cities for these people. And the difference between living on the peripheries of cities and in the cities, well, there are many differences. The first thing that we can say is that because these areas fall outside of the official zones of the municipalities, they're not even qualified to ask for services like electricity, water, sewage, and sanitation. That is assuming that the municipalities even are able to offer these services to their own residents, which they are not. And we have been seeing cuts in water and electricity even growing more and more in the past few years. Also, the dwellings are very substandard and often very unsafe. On top of the fact that most of these people don't find any real employment. Now, some of the adult men go to the city and look for something to do, delivery, street peddling, those kinds of things, but not all can even do that. In fact, the situation is so bad that in the past several years now, we have something called dumpster diving, where people go and dive into trash cans in the streets and look for something that they can find to eat or to sell. And this is a very widespread problem all over the country, as you can see in these photos. Of course, the government doesn't come out and give you statistics, or they don't even mention it really in any of the media affiliated to them. But the problem does exist, and this has become a very common scene in the country. There are children, thousands and thousands of children that are sent to work. As you can see here, these children are on the streets and working for some income. And this is also a very rampant problem in the country. Some of these people have not actually moved. They may have been living in the same regions that they were living in, but they are forced to do kinds of work that are either very hard physically or even dangerous to their safety. For example, in the northwest of the country, we have bag carriers, and thousands of them. People who take merchandise and carry it on their back and cross international borders illegally in order to evade customs and sell their merchandise and make a profit. And this work is very dangerous. For one thing, sometimes they are shot by border guards as they are passing through the border areas. And some other times they have accidents as they have to hike through some very dangerous terrain. And there are thousands and thousands of these people that are doing this as their only ways of survival. In the southeast of the country, we have fuel runners, people that buy cheaper fuel inside Iran and drive it on their cars, which are usually very unsafe, dilapidated cars, across the border to Pakistan in order to sell the fuel to make a profit. And their business is also very dangerous. Often they get shot by border guards, or their cars have accidents, they roll over and catch fire. And so all these facts should show you that the situation of poverty is very serious in this country. And as we said, the government has not even been forthcoming about admitting it. Although when something cannot be hidden anymore, it comes out, and even media inside start to talk about it. As we see, for example, in this article, which is actually from VOA, Voice of America, the Persian service, but it just directly quotes from media inside the country. And so, for example, in this article, which is only 2 years old, and we can only be sure that the situation has got much worse in the 2 years since this article has been published, it says statistics talk for themselves. Close to 60% of the people are under the shadow of poverty. And the article quotes from an internet-based media inside the country, which quotes authorities in the government who say that 30% of the population are living below poverty line, and another 27% living in circumstances very close to poverty. And this outlet rephrases this quote by saying that close to 60% of the people are either in absolute poverty or are just getting by with bare minimums. And it's important to notice the term absolute poverty, which this newspaper infers from the quote and uses explicitly, because the authorities have generally been hesitant to even use the term. But the quote actually means that, because they are saying that 27% are getting by with bare minimums and another 30% are worse off than these people. And that means these other 30% are in absolute poverty, because worse off than bare minimum obviously means not having even the bare minimums. Now, if you scroll down the same article, you will hear that more directly from someone very high in government, someone in Expediency Council, which is a body which sits above the 3 branches of government and can override them. Now, if you're asking how can anybody override the 3 branches of government, that's a different question, which goes back to the system of government in this country, which cannot be qualified as a democracy. But here we are just quoting this person as saying that 19,700,000 people, so that's close to 20 million people, in the country are deprived of basic necessities of life, such as shelter, employment, education to 12th grade, health, food, and clothing. And so if you're deprived of, for example, shelter and health and food and clothing, that means you're in absolute poverty. And he's saying that 20 million people in the country are in this situation. We should note here that now we have come to talk about poverty in Iran in general, while our subject today is only water shortage and its effects on the country's economy. While it may not be possible to pinpoint these effects exactly and put them in numbers, it is clear that with displacements of millions of people, a large part of the economic problems that the country is facing today stem from water shortage. The Iranian government usually blames the economic situation on Western sanctions that have been put on this country for some decades now. And it is quite true that these sanctions have put severe strains on Iran's economy and its ability to grow. But most independent experts put the blame first on inefficient and corrupt governance and mismanagement of the country's natural resources, rather than on sanctions. Okay, so to summarize our presentation today, we have talked about loss of available water resources, surface and ground, and precipitation, and the economic consequences for millions of people of Iran. Many experts call this situation water bankruptcy, because the country is using more water than the ecosystems are able to renew. In other words, the country is borrowing water from nature without being able to pay it back. Therefore, sometime soon, there will be no water left to borrow. Overuse of resources has also caused desertification and land sinking, with their consequences on public safety and economy. We will talk about the environmental consequences in our next presentation. But for today, let's just use this slide to summarize how in a period of about 30 years, Iran has gone from not ever worrying about water to water bankruptcy. And we are calling this slide 1 because there is more slides coming up in our next presentations. So we are saying water bankruptcy in Iran causes. Until 1990s, availability of water for agriculture and industrial and residential use was not seen as a limitation by Iranian governments. But during the past 30 years, 31,000 of Iran's 69,000 agricultural villages have been abandoned, and thousands of the remaining villages have run out of water. And in 2025, in urban centers, water is shut daily for several hours, sometimes without notice. So in this paragraph, we are basically saying that only about 30 years ago, where water was seen as an unlimited resource and treated as such, we've gone to a situation where almost half of the agriculture has been completely disrupted. And even in urban centers where water had been distributed easily, we are having shutdowns without notice. And this is because during the past 30 years, population has grown, while on the demand side, government policies have pushed for increased agricultural output and industrial and urban development projects, mostly driven by short-term special interests rather than long-term public interests, while neglecting importance of controlling consumption and conservation and efficiency. So in this paragraph, we are looking at the demand side. And why look at demand side first? Because demand has actually driven the supply, not the other way around. And so we are saying that agricultural output and industrial and urban development have been encouraged, and a lot of consumption and usage has happened in these areas. But this hasn't been done in any kind of a sustainable way, because it's been driven by projects that have been driven by a special interest of a small elites who were looking for their short-term profit rather than long-term profits of the public. And all of that while neglecting the importance of controlling consumption and limiting consumption where possible, and conservation, which can have a bigger meaning than just limiting consumption, and efficiency, which means that you haven't been getting the best results out of the water that have been supplied to you. And on the supply side, the government has encouraged and allowed unsustainable water management and distribution projects, similarly mostly driven by short-term special interests rather than long-term public interests, without consideration of possible environmental impacts. So on the supply side, where the supply side has been a slave to the demand side, again, the government hasn't looked at developing any kind of sustainability in the way that they have managed and distributed water. And again, why this has happened this way is because the projects or the supply projects, which are basically dams and water transfer projects and wells that have been dug, these kinds of activities have been driven by short-term special interests, just like on the demand side, rather than long-term public interests. And again, or similarly, without consideration of what the environmental impacts will be. You're destroying the country's ecosystems. And so the combination of these factors have brought the country to a situation of water bankruptcy. Well, this is a summary. In our next presentation, we will share with you in more detail how this has happened and the environmental consequences, which will worsen the economic situation too. Please have your notifications on and join us. And please share any comments or questions about what you have seen today, now or later, when we post this live on our Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you soon.